First, let's start with this case. My brother Joe, a 55-year-old man, is about to marry Sue, who is 27. A few months ago, Sue asked me, a 60-year-old woman, and my sister June, 53, to be bridesmaids. I was genuinely touched, especially since I've only met Sue a handful of times. They live in another state. Besides me and June, there are 4 other bridesmaids, all under 30. When Sue sent me the link for the bridesmaid dress, I was shocked. The dress is undeniably sexy. Plunging neckline, thigh-high slit, and so clingy that it would showcase every lump and bump on my body. While I'm not a prude and I consider myself reasonably fit, I am 60 years old. I couldn't imagine wearing something so revealing at a formal event, surrounded by family members. I called Sue and politely asked if there was a more modest version of the dress I could wear. She firmly said no and explained that she wanted all her bridesmaids to wear the same dress. I didn't want to create drama or strain family relationships, so I dropped the issue. For context, June doesn't like the dress either, but she's a marathon runner and feels she can pull it off. To make the dress work for me, I ordered it several sizes too large and took it to a seamstress. She tailored it so it fit well without clinging to my backside and made subtle modifications. The neckline was raised to cover more cleavage, and the thigh-high slit was lowered to end a few inches above my knee instead of nearly to my hip. The changes were modest and didn't significantly alter the overall look of the dress. In fact, I thought it looked great on me after the adjustments. When Sue found out that I had altered the dress, she was furious. She texted me saying she didn't want a chopped-up dress in her wedding photos. I sent her photos of me wearing the dress, hoping to show her how subtle the changes were, but she wasn't appeased. Joe later called to tell me I was being disinvited from the wedding party and that Sue had already replaced me with one of her friends. Feeling unwelcome, I canceled my hotel reservation. Fortunately, I hadn't bought a plane ticket yet. I assumed they didn't want me at the wedding at all, and I didn't want to make things awkward, especially since my sister June is still in the wedding party. It seemed like it would be easier for them to explain my absence by saying she couldn't make the trip. Plus, I wasn't keen on spending more money on an event where I felt excluded. I'd already spent hundreds on the dress, alterations, and matching shoes. I told Joe I was still happy for him and Sue, and that I would send them a generous wedding gift. However, Joe insisted they wanted me at the wedding and is now upset that I'm not going. Sue has told June that I've ruined her wedding. So, am I in the wrong for altering the dress to feel more comfortable? And after everything blew up, am I wrong for deciding not to attend the wedding altogether? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Sue's acting like you ruined your dress completely, even though you paid a professional. Also, the age gap between the happy couple is a little odd. She shouldn't be surprised that a different generation wants to dress slightly differently. Everyone sucks. I knew we were in for a ride with the 55-year-old groom and 27-year-old bride, and this did not disappoint. I feel like these dresses either skew super fancy or super trashy, and I have a theory on which end of the spectrum they fall. Regardless, the bride is acting a little over-controlling here, and Joe is enabling the vengeful crazy. OP asked for a reasonable accommodation, and they went nuclear. OP is being an idiot to themselves by still sending a generous wedding gift after being so blatantly discarded. Technically, alternating the dress unilaterally was suspect, but given the circumstances and the type of people she's dealing with, I give a pass on that, since it was done tastefully within the spirit of the original. Honestly, I can't even believe this is happening. Sue's attitude towards a 60-year-old woman wanting to feel comfortable at her wedding is just wild. The dress was clearly not designed with someone of your age in mind, and altering it to make you feel more dignified and modest isn't ruining her wedding. It's doing what any reasonable person would do to preserve their dignity. The way she reacted, though, that's a massive red flag. It sounds like it was more about her wanting to control every detail of her wedding, including how her bridesmaids look, rather than considering anyone's feelings or comfort. And now she's punishing you for trying to make it work? Unbelievable. You weren't disrespectful. You just wanted to fit in without feeling exposed. It seems like Sue and Joe need to get their priorities straight. Next up, I want to start by saying that I love my mother-in-law. Every year, we usually host Thanksgiving at our house, but this year things have changed because of my new job. I work from home for a large company, and as many people know, Thanksgiving and the day after are extremely busy for online shopping. My shift on Thanksgiving runs from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., so hosting isn't an option for us this year. I let my mother-in-law know this well in advance since Thanksgiving was going to be at her place, and I wouldn't be able to help with cooking. Before officially making plans, she told me she would schedule dinner later in the evening so I could still make a plate and spend time with family. Fast forward to October, my sister-in-law sent out a group text to everyone announcing that Thanksgiving dinner would be at 12 p.m. My husband replied, reminding them that I wouldn't be off work until 6 p.m. The response? They knew. To make things worse, my husband volunteered me to cook the turkey, fully aware that I have to work that day. This means I'll now have to get up extremely early to prepare the turkey before my long 11-hour shift. On top of that, I also have to work another 11-hour shift on Black Friday. I already know I'll be exhausted, and by the time I make it to my mother-in-law's house, the food will likely be gone, and people will be getting ready to leave. At this point, I don't see the point of going over. My mother-in-law wasn't willing to adjust the time, I can't skip work, and the whole situation feels unfair. Now my husband is mad at me for saying I'm not sure if I'll make it. Am I in the wrong for not wanting to push myself to go to Thanksgiving after everything that's happened? Or is it reasonable to sit this one out? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Your husband volunteered you to make the turkey, knowing you had a full work day? Screw that. Tell him he will have to make it because he has no business speaking for you. No, I get the feeling that your SIL got peeved when she found out your MIL was going to shift the meal to later in the day. I don't know whether that was because you have the nerve to be working or that she is a princess and the only one who should be accommodated is unknown. Based on the assumption that your household needs your income, your husband should be supporting you. If he has an issue, he needs to take it up with his sister and not penalize you for his own family's histrionics. You're not in the wrong. You're not in the wrong. I'd group text him and his family. My H forgot I'm working 12 hours Thanksgiving, and the next day when he volunteered me to make the turkey. I won't be off work till after you're done with dinner. Hope you all can sort out the turkey and have a lovely Thanksgiving. He's really blowing it, as is his family, as the message to you is very unkind. So act like they did and announce rather than confer with these jerks. Next up, I'm a 47-year-old man with a 14-year-old son from my previous marriage to my late wife. She passed away 2 years ago, and my son is still deeply affected by her loss. They were incredibly close, sharing a love for reading, history, and art. They even looked alike, which made their bond feel even stronger. Their favorite place in the world was the British Museum in London. For years, their passion project was redrawing pieces from the museum's collection. For the last 4 years, we've made it a tradition to visit England twice a year. Once in June for my wife's birthday, and once in December for my son's birthday, so they could spend time together at the museum. Since her passing, my son and I have continued the trips for his birthday, as it's the one thing that makes him truly happy. He doesn't ask for gifts, parties, or cake, just this annual trip. The issue arose with my new wife, who is 39. She's joined us on this trip once, last year, and didn't enjoy it. Now we've recently found out that we're expecting a baby together in May. She brought up that the money we've been using for the museum trips could be better saved for the baby, and suggested we do something else for my son's birthday this year. After thinking about it, I agreed, as I felt it was practical to start saving for the baby's future. When we told my son yesterday, he was devastated. He became very upset, and when my wife tried to explain the financial reasoning behind the decision, he cut her off, saying he didn't care. Things escalated into an argument. He said he was angry because if he missed this year's trip, he wouldn't get to see a new exhibit he's been eagerly anticipating. He also accused my wife of canceling the trip intentionally because, in his words, she already doesn't like me. I admit I lost my temper and yelled at him, which made him cry. He hasn't spoken to me in the last 24 hours. Now I'm questioning whether I handled this situation poorly. Should I have prioritized the trip for my son, given its emotional importance to him? Or was I right to focus on saving for the baby's future? Am I wrong for how I reacted to my son's disappointment? Let's start judging. Your shiny new wife chose to act worse than a whiny toddler and ruined a trip that we meant for a child on their birthday, as a memory for his mother. You allowed this woman to make your son feel terrible in his favorite place in the world on his birthday. You allowed this woman to take the one thing your child has ever wanted, to shift it over to something that has nothing to do with your son. For his birthday, you yelled at your son for reacting badly to being shoved aside for your new family. You allow your new wife to mistreat your son, not even bothering to raise any question at, "She hates me" at all. Of course, you're in the wrong. You're in the wrong in a huge way. By calling it a goddamn museum, you're minimizing the importance of this tradition. You're denying your son a connection he has with his late mother, all in the name of saving money for the new baby. Your son feels like you're abandoning him for this new family. I don't blame him. You seem like a terrible father. It seems like you don't care that your kid lost his mother. Was he okay with you moving on with another woman? Lots of men with kids do, because they can't handle the responsibility of raising kids alone, and it's almost never okay with the kids. Think about what you're doing here. It won't be long before your son leaves you behind and goes no contact. Good thing you have this new backup family, right? So in 2 years you moved one, got to know her so well, got married. Was there an affair before your wife died? Were you happy that she died? Do you wish that your son wasn't around? Because you know the importance of this trip. You dragged along a woman who seems to hate your son and is making you hateful towards him too. Do you resent the fact that your son is still alive, still sad, and still needs your love and care? When the new baby comes, are you going to neglect your son because your witchy new wife feels you should only be a father to her child? You sound awful. Your new wife is awful. You're in the wrong. Next up, I'm a 24-year-old woman, and my parents divorced when I was 3. Since then, I've always lived with my mom. I had a good relationship with my dad until I turned 14, when he started a new family, and our contact became increasingly sporadic. Over time, we stopped catching up as much, and the relationship faded into occasional interactions. I still live in the house where I grew up, which is owned by my mom. Before the divorce, it was our family home, so my dad is familiar with the house and the apartment complex. One of the residents in our complex is Paul, my dad's best friend of over 30 years, whom my dad describes as a family friend. However, neither my mom nor I like Paul very much. He doesn't respect boundaries, and his behavior makes us uncomfortable. For example, Paul occasionally comes into our home uninvited, citing apartment-related issues. Once, he stayed for over 2 hours, asking for coffee multiple times and even helping himself to our fridge without asking. While I consider myself a welcoming person, his soft entitlement and disregard for personal boundaries really bother me. Recently, my dad started a new job that requires him to drive by our house, so he began stopping by once a week. At first, I was thrilled, hoping this would be a chance to rebuild our relationship. Unfortunately, it hasn't turned out that way. Most of the time, when my dad visits, he brings Paul with him. Often when I call to check when he'll arrive, he tells me he's at Paul's and that they'll come over together. Once they're at my house, they sit in the living room for a couple of hours, drink coffee, and leave. Last week, I asked my dad to come over and watch a movie with me, hoping for some one-on-one time. Instead, he called to say he was at Paul's and added, "We're coming in a minute." That's when I snapped. I told him I didn't want Paul to come over and asked if he could visit alone. When he asked why, I explained that I just didn't want Paul there. My dad exploded, accusing me of being rude and saying, "Since when can't Paul come to our house?" I responded that this isn't his house anymore and suggested that if he wanted to hang out with Paul, they could do so elsewhere. My dad hung up on me and didn't come over at all. His reaction surprised me, and I felt hurt because I thought our time together mattered more than his time with Paul. When I told my mom what happened, she said I was right to set boundaries, and that my dad is known to get angry and dismissive when things don't go his way. Even so, I feel guilty. Maybe I could have overlooked Paul's presence for the sake of keeping the peace, but I also feel like my boundaries should matter. Am I in the wrong for asking my dad not to bring Paul into our house? Or was I justified in standing my ground? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Your mom knows this truth about your father. He's a steamroller and will use guilt and a false sense of entitlement to get what he wants. Your mom needs to make it clear that Paul can't come in, unless he has an order from management for repairs, etc., and then you want verification of that. But no letting him stay for forever. He may not have boundaries, but you and your mom can have them. Also, let the manager know that you aren't comfortable with Paul coming over, and due to previous interactions, you want a phone call in advance if he's meant to do any maintenance. Follow up. As for your dad, let him be mad. He's making his visiting you only on his terms. I'm sorry he's such a disappointment. You are a good daughter for protecting your home. You're not in the wrong. Paul is not my father. You are. Sometimes I just want to spend time with my dad. That does not appear to be the same for you. If you prefer Paul's company over mine, I suggest you just see Paul from now on. And keep telling Dad it is no longer his home to do with as he chooses. You're not in the wrong. You absolutely do not have to host creepy moocher Paul, ever. And you don't even have to have an excuse for it. Learn to say no or, sorry, that doesn't work for me, without an excuse. If they ask why, just repeat it. But I wanted to hang out with just you, to your dad is a perfectly valid one. I'm sorry your dad is prioritizing spending time with Paul over you. He's trying to have his cake and eat it too, by hosting Paul at your place where he doesn't pay for groceries and utilities too. It's very selfish of him.